what's happening with that. But Big 12, there's no doubt the best feel-good story, and it's unanimous. The best feel-good story in the Big 12 is TCU. What is the team, if you look at expectations, Baylor's got to be in that discussion because they were picked to win the conference, and they're not going to be. That ended when Kansas State took their soul away a couple of weekends ago. Who else would be in that discussion if you look at what the season was supposed to be is a disappointment?
Oklahoma State.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
the two teams that played for the Big 12 title last year.
Yeah, I think Oklahoma State returning their quarterback. Now, look, they lost some skill position talent that's clear that took them a while to kind of find themselves from that. But, there's a school of thought that says that things would not have gotten bad for them if their injury problems were not this prodigious. So, yeah, I think that's a disappointment. I don't think they expected to, especially in the last month of the season, get rolled over by Kansas State in such a way that was so terrible, and then fall behind so badly in Bedlam you just could not get back in the game no matter how hard you tried.
And then look at the way when they were undefeated, Paul, when they played at TCU in one of those games where TCU found a way, because they're like a snake. You got to cut their head off, 43-40, and then, of course, they came back against Texas, and you're like, they just blew the game again. Not blew it. TCU won the game. They're sitting there really pretty at 6-1, and then all hell broke loose after that Texas game with injuries piling up. Kansas State blown out by Kansas, won the game against Iowa State, beaten up pretty. Yeah, they did show something at the end, although it was down 28-0. There was a chance they almost got back in that game. I don't know what happens with West Virginia. They're favored. They're at home. But, yeah, it's been a disappointing year for the two teams that played last year.
I mean, I think it's different kind of disappointments, though, because I think Oklahoma State's is squarely on the shoulders of injuries and Spencer Sanders in particular, whereas Baylor's are like a combination of all sorts of things. It's not like their quarterback got hurt and then they dropped 2-3 games. They've had the same team, like basically the entire year. Now, there's been pockets of this guy's hurt, that guy at running back or whatever.
Which is football.
And so, I don't see that for them as their excuse of like, oh, well, if they had Richard Reese healthy, they would have been. No, I don't think that's the case for them. If Spencer Sanders had been healthy, Oklahoma State doesn't go on as much of a skid, but they had a number of injuries. So, at least their disappointment has a reason behind it that's out of their control. But yeah, still in the bigger picture, a disappointing season. I just think that there's a little bit of but this happened, and so you can kind of understand where it's coming from. Baylor, not so much. Iowa State, they've won one game since starting off 3-0. They beat Iowa. Like, that really mattered in the long run. Hey, congratulations, you finally beat Iowa. You're not even making a bowl game the year that you do that. So they've gone from, super hot head coaching candidate and Big 12 potential, like on the rise team to, they beat West Virginia, so they won't be the worst team in the conference, but, at least as far as that head-to-head goes. But, yeah, they've won one game since, what would that be, since September 17th. It's almost December, so that's clearly a disappointment. Oklahoma, I don't care what rebuild you thought you were walking into. There were plenty of people that didn't think there was any rebuild at all, that they were just going to reload and show everybody that Lincoln Riley was overrated and he was nothing, and, they don't need Caleb Williams and all this jazz. And, they're 2 games under 500 in Big 12 play, and I don't think that's, anything any Sooner fan thought that they would ever have to really wrap their heads around. So I think that even given the changeover, certainly it's been a disappointing season for Oklahoma. And then beyond that, I think you've got pretty much everybody feeling okay about where they are, feeling good about the direction that they're going. But and then West Virginia, obviously, disappointing because you knew coming in that you were going to have to do certain things to probably save Neil Brown's job. Now, as we know, he could very well still, due to the buyout, hang around a little while longer, but Shane Lyons is already gone. And, clearly there's this feeling of there needs to be some change here pretty soon for that fan base before they just absolutely explode and, riot over the head coaching position. So, yeah, it's been disappointing for them as well. Because if y'all remember, there's a lot of West Virginia fans that were talking big noise walking into this season once they got JT Daniels. I don't know if y'all remember that, but there were some West Virginia fans in the chat who were talking big game.
Well, I don't know how big they were excited.
I'm not talking playoffs.
Yeah,
I'm talking. They were talking trash though about like where they sat in the Big 12, and I'm not, trash talking them. Like that's just what was going on, and. So yeah, there was clearly some level of anticipation by at least some in that fan base. So yeah, to be 2-6 in Big 12 play, to be 4-7. JT Daniels is not even your quarterback by the end of the year. I think that's got to be a disappointment as well. So evens out to about close to half the league. I'd say those are kind of the disappointing storylines, though.
I'm disappointed I don't have time to jump into the chat room more often, but we see you. We appreciate you. A lot of you back and forth on rivalries and conferences and who's this or who's that. And so much more, and we appreciate it. And I'm trying to do a better job of maybe sometimes, and if you're in the chat room, explain. I'm trying to try not to jump into these things as much as I used to.
Yeah, that's a good thing. It's a positive step forward for you. I do see.
I miss those guys.
I do see people saying Oklahoma. Oklahoma has expectations because they're Oklahoma, but I do think that if you really expectation versus reality and what reality should have dictated. Now, I don't think that Oklahoma should have thought they would have a season where the second to last week they've got to win a game to be bowl eligible or be in a in a precarious position to maybe not go into a postseason game at all. But I do think that they should have tempered their expectations of just rolling back into the championship game because change is hard, and it worked out for Lincoln Riley on the other side at USC for one major reason, is that he didn't have to change a thing about words he told his quarterback. I think that's the biggest difference. And that, look, they brought better players with them for sure.
A generational quarterback, mind you, not just anybody.
Yeah, a generational quarterback that he can just say, you remember that play we ran last year? Same thing. I'm not changing it. There's nothing he had to change. And so that was able to roll on. Even though Dylan Gabriel knew Jeff Lebby a little bit, that had been a couple years since they'd spent any time together. Mm-hmm. There's adjustment. And then not only that, the talent that they lost versus the talent they brought in, USC brought in a bunch of better players. Oklahoma brought in players that were not as talented. And that drop-off was not anticipated or even addressed by the majority of their fans, and you can see it. They did not have the playmakers they've had in the past, not just at quarterback, when Dylan Gabriel's a good quarterback, but he's not Caleb Williams, and those guys on the outside are not the guys that they lost either.
They've got Eric Gray, and that's pretty much it. Mm-hmm. I mean, as far as anything consistent goes, and I guess you want to sprinkle some Drake Stoops in there.
Well, Marvin Mims is a talent, but it's been.
Let's be real about him. He's a talent, and I get that, but he is not by any stretch of the imagination some week-to-week consistently solid wide receiver. He's not. He's a very good player. But I'm talking about your go-to guys every week. He might be somebody you list.
If they had their normal 2, 3, 4 receivers, then Marvin Mims is really, really good.
Sure, yeah. You surround anybody with 2 or 3 other really good players to take some of the heat off you. But as far as him going and being an alpha dog without a lot of help around him or without a super duper talented quarterback, no, I think that we've kind of seen over the last couple of years that that's not who he is, and that's my point is just that, but. Yeah, definitely a disappointment for them. Even if you thought, like you said, Paul, that there's going to be somewhat of a step back, not maybe going 6-6 or 7-5. That's a pretty steep step back. That's a good 3 losses more than you're normal to in any given year, maybe 4 in most years for Oklahoma. So it's been disappointing. I think just the question is how long does it take for a turnaround? And how long will it take them to kind of sink their teeth and claws into this thing, revamp the roster, and get it to where they want it to be? And can they do it, in enough time to go out in the Big 12 on a high note that they're more accustomed to, and enter the SEC on a high note? I don't know. That's what we'll learn here over the next couple seasons. But they certainly belong in the disappointing category.
Before we get back to the Michigan-Ohio State game, earlier we discussed the Michigan perspective with Angelique Shengalis. We're going to have Dan Hope on in a minute. But Big 12 media predictions. Baylor 1. Oklahoma was 2, and I think that was on name and logo. Oklahoma State 3. Texas 4. They're going to head above that. Kansas State 5, Iowa State 6, TCU 7. So the second consecutive year, there's a chance a team last year picked 7th or 8th Baylor, and this year TCU picked 7th, Kansas State 5th, going to win the Big 12 title, and Texas still has that small percentage, but they do have a chance to play in that game depending on what happens with Kansas State, KU, and what they do with Baylor. So there we are with the media predictions. And